for Mary along the way. Okay, recording progress, yeah. So if there are any questions along the way, I'll be checking out your questions and helping Mary along the way as well.
That's
Okay.
rude. It's a new Zoom feature.
Yeah, that's a new Zoom feature. So welcome everyone once again. Yeah. And Mary Ann is from Ireland, and she's the host of the Coaching Present podcast and community. So without further ado, let's give our big round of applause for Mary. Yay, let's welcome her on stage. Mary, the time is yours.
Thank you so much. And Jeddah, you've slightly stolen my thunder because I wanted to start off by asking you, who trusts me? Do you trust me? It's an open question. Perhaps thumbs up, thumbs down, or use the chat box. Yes or no, do you trust me right now? I'd love to hear.
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, trust how? Trust me to look after money for you? Trust me to look after a newborn baby? What's your level of trust with me?
Unconditional trust.
Wow.
Say that again, Jer.
Unconditional trust.
You've got some very trusting people here.
Well, it could be
very
4 or
trusting.
5
I'm
o'clock
surprised.
before I'm home, but anyways, yeah.
I think Jedi just slightly by using the word beloved with me.
All right, and I'll talk to you later on. So, okay. All right.
Okay, let me help you adjust the administrative there. Yeah.
So I think I was hoping to come in quite sternly and look all kind of yes, and to ask if you trusted me, but I got a warmer welcome than I was expecting. So I was asking the question because I think trust can be dependent on knowledge of a person and experience of a person. I'll go into a little bit more than that as we go through, but I want to start off, and actually I can see a familiar face who knows me in the audience. So I want to start off by introducing myself, and there's a reason why I'm going to do that in the way that I'm going to do it. So today I want to talk to you about, I'm going to introduce myself, and there's a reason. Then I'm going to talk to you about what trust is, what builds it, what breaks it. I want this to be really interactive, which is what Jedi's here to help look at comments. So please just, there'll be some points where I really want your input into this. Then I'm going to think about why trust matters, and then really about coaching for trust. I know that this summit is really for managers and coaches. I'm a coach. And then finally, plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. But if there's anything that comes up as we talk through, then do use the chat function for that. But and Jedi can keep an eye on that for me, but there will be opportunities, deliberate opportunities for questions. We'll get a chunk at the end and for comments as we go through. So let me start off by just thinking about, or telling you about myself. Listen, there's a reason for this. Okay. So this is my background. I worked in some environmental charities, and I was working in London, quite a big job as the head of communications for one of the London boroughs. I've got a previous history as a journalist on a national newspaper. And then 10 years ago, I'd got a new baby after a long fertility battle. My mum died very shortly after my baby was born. I had trained to be a coach, and we just thought life's too short. So we made the move from central London to very rural part of Ireland. And I've got lots of animals now. I live on the coast. The postcard image is shows the heritage of my husband's family. Those little children are now in their 60s. They're my brothers-in-law and sister-in-law. So this is where I live now. And as Jedi said, I'm an MCC with the ICF. I work as a coach. I work with corporate clients around the world and with civil servants in Ireland. And I also work with a lot of coaches. I help them get their credentials. I offer coach supervision. And I've got an online community called Coaching Presence. So I've got some online courses as well. And I will be offering retreats for coaches working with horses, to use horses to help uncover presence. I also want to tell you a story. So 7 years ago now, I was involved with a global ICF conference in Sweden. And because I've been traveling for shorter trips to and from to help organize it, but for the actual conference itself, it was going to revolve a week in Sweden. My daughter was only 4 at the time, so we thought, right, we'll all go as a family. So she had a little tiny suitcase. You may recognize this suitcase. You may have one at your house. Very proud of the suitcase, gave her a bit of independence. She could ride it around. Get to the airport, loads of stuff to take. And I say to her, look, we're going to check that suitcase in. Don't worry. The airline takes millions of bits of baggage every year. It'll be safe. Sure enough, the suitcase gets lost. The reason I'm bringing it up is because 7 years later, it came up in conversation last week about the time the airline lost the suitcase, and I had said, don't worry, it'll be safe. So there's something in that story about trust being lost, me putting my trust in a bigger organization. So, bit of thinking then, why did I tell you all of that stuff about me? What does that tell you about trust? Can you use the chat function and just give me some things about why I've told you all of that, and what bits relate to trust? Jedi, I don't actually see the chat function here. Do you see it?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, I
So
can
it's-
see it now. There we go.
Okay, great.
Credibility. You also exposed yourself. Yeah. Rapport. What you expected from the company. Yes, a known brand. What I expected from them. What about the stuff that I shared about my background and making the move to Ireland? I shared my story. Something about making the move myself. Empathize, align, yes. We trust what we know and what we can relate to. Something about brands. If you remember, I shared my MCC, and I'm going to be sharing it forever because I'm very, very proud of it. I'm liking this. Apparently I look too kind and sweet for us not to trust me. I'm liking that. Vulnerable, personal story. Okay. So what I shared was exactly right. There was a bit about credibility. There were bits in that story you could possibly relate to. So we have a tendency to trust people that are like us. Something about reputation, helping you get to know me. There was a bit about brands in there, understanding my values. There was stuff about family, living in the countryside as well. Sometimes, yeah, we trust people that have similar values to us. I'm not perfect. The importance of story. And then there was something else I wanted to share, which is actually trust this process. I hope you trust me now and know that I'm not just going to talk endlessly about myself for the sake of it without there being a purpose to that. So trusting the process. And that's very relevant when we come to talk about coaching, because I think part of coaching is about trusting the process of coaching. Okay, so let's have a think about what trust is and what builds it and what breaks it. The Oxford University Dictionary definition of trust is it's a firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. There's something interesting in this definition in itself, a firm belief in the truth of someone or something. And I think that's worth remembering because truth varies. What I believe to be true may be different from what you believe to be true. So there's something in that. So we know that trust might vary with different situations, levels of trust, different people, and roles. For example, we might trust our doctor. We hopefully can trust our doctor. You know, certain roles bring about a sense of trust. A bit more interaction then. This time, let's have a think about what builds trust. What kind of behaviors build trust in the workplace? So I'm a coach. I work with a lot of corporate clients around the world, and I've picked up on some of this stuff, and I'm sure that you have too. The kind of things that people do that build trust. Keeping your word, walking the talk, doing what you commit to. Honesty. Staying open-minded, trusting people in return. Clarity. Not judging others' credit. Yeah. And then let's have a think then about what will break it. What would break trust? Integrity builds it, yes. Dishonesty breaks it. Anything else that breaks trust? Unable to meet the commitment. Yeah, that kind of over-keeping, over-promising, misunderstandings. Hypocrisy. That's saying one thing, doing another. I've got some others. So building trust. It's all about kind of hearing and supporting. Investing in people, empowering people, providing feedback, inclusive decision-making. Making people feel that they're involved and following through with that. This doesn't mean that you're agreeing with everybody, but it's you're taking other people's point of view on board. And what can break trust? Micromanaging, not trusting people to get on with the job. Knowledge hiding. So when you kind of have this big scheme of how the organization's going to go, but you don't share that, it's only certain people that are party to it. Obviously, there are certain things within companies that not everyone needs to know, but actually the general direction should be shared. And it shouldn't be used as a kind of we're in the know and you're not in the know, because that breaks trust. Assumptions, lack of clarity, we talked about before, and alienation, holding favorites as well. I think I skipped a slide. No, I didn't. That's weird. Because I was going to say that actually there's two forms of trust. So if you remember my story, I was talking about myself a lot, sharing you all the stuff about my daughter and living in Ireland and all of that kind of stuff. This is all about effective trust. That's about knowing people. So you have an experience of me now, or you think you know me based on my story. It's about rapport, an emotional connection with me. It's more likely that we will trust people like us. So we need to be aware that we may have bias in here as well. So we've got this affective trust, and we also have cognitive trust. And that is real belief. It's not knowing, it's belief. It's about reliability, capability. There is a real correlation here with leader effectiveness. So the affective trust and the cognitive trust. One's more kind of emotional and one's more based on experience. When we're thinking about building trust, you know, the old days, there used to be these kind of take your team away on an away day, climb up a few hills, do an obstacle course. And the classic was the trust fall, where someone would fall backwards and be caught by their team. And I don't think it actually did much to build trust, but it certainly was a kind of a break from the office. When I was kind of researching what I was going to talk about today, there's a whole load of memes now about this trust fall thing, and they're calling it the trust fall fail. So here's just one I found, the kind of the whale falling over backwards onto the fishing boat. I've got another one in a second, because we've talked a bit now about what trust is and what trust isn't, but we're getting onto the crux of the issue here, which is why trust matters, and why trust matters even more right now. Here's another one of these memes. This is talking about when we're social distancing, the trust fall is going to fail in 20. Well, this was 2020, but even more so now in 2021. I think we thought we were all okay, and we're still 6 foot apart. This is the image that I used on the opening slide, and I called the talk Beyond These Four Walls. The reason being, I realize that some of you don't have English as a first language, but there's a real expression in England about, keep that between these four walls when you're sort of sharing something confidential, as if somehow being in a building contains the secret, or kind of the building itself has something to do with containing, something to do with trust. This image shows actually pretty much directly the impact that I've heard from my clients around the world. That with working from home, suddenly people aren't visible. They're not visible in the way that they might be in an office. And so there's been this feeling that they have to almost prove their productivity because they're not at their desk, by being responsive to emails in the middle of the night, by being on call all the time. One of the other impacts that I've noticed is that because people aren't having that general kind of chats, we call them water cooler moments, the kind of just general, put the kettle on to make a drink and you kind of have a casual conversation with somebody walking past. You're not in the party with the general kind of, oh, that's my doggy yawning, with the general stuff that's happening in the work environment. And you're missing out on just knowing so-and-so's project's going well, or, oh, I heard that this person's about to leave, so so-and-so stepping up into that role, or, well, the project that the other team are doing is really flying now, and so they've asked for some extra resources to get it over the line. That kind of informal conversation isn't happening with people working from home. And so the impact has been that people are working in more and more meetings. And most of my clients, I find, they're just not getting time to get their work done. Oh. And when we look at the impact of working from home, I know that there was a big, who was it that did the research? There was a big survey from one of the software companies, and they found that the average person was working 2 hours more every day while working from home at the beginning of the pandemic, because this kind of not party to different conversations, just having to be in back-to-back meetings, having to eke away time. On top of that, of course, many people were homeschooling their children, so they had that as well as the workload. Clients are reporting this feeling the need to increase their visibility because they weren't in the office, massive numbers of meetings. And this is beyond these four walls, because we were in our own four walls, away from those four walls of the office. Trust really is the building block of teams. If I'm to share this slide with you now, this is a kind of classic, really, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's all about, at the very top, you see there's an inattention to results, no avoidance of accountability, lack of commitment, fear of conflict. Right at the bottom, the foundation of a team is trust. If there's an absence of trust, all of this other stuff stacks on top. Even before the pandemic, PricewaterhouseCoopers in their did a survey of CEOs. 55% felt that lack of trust was a threat to growth. It's major stuff. Before I get on to talking about coaching for trust, I want to just talk a little bit about the neuroscience of trust, what trust is. There is a fantastic piece of research by someone called Paul Zak. He had been looking at the economics of trust. I was saying that, would you trust me enough to lend me money? Well, he literally did this experiment where people were sent money and they had to trust whether the person receiving it was going to split the rewards with them, one of those kind of psychological experiments. And in thinking about, well, what is it that causes trust? Some of the people in the experiment were given oxytocin. Oxytocin is that kind of the drug that we produce when we're nursing our children, when we hug It's, you know, it's one of the basic elements of the chemical of trust, really. So people dosed with oxytocin in this experiment would send twice as much money as people that weren't dosed with oxytocin. And of course, we know that stress can be an oxytocin inhibitor. In other words, stress can get in the way of trust. I'm realizing I'm showing you an old slide deck handily. Let me talk you through some of the statistics about trust. I've got handily got the printout of the correct slide deck. High trust organizations found that they showed 74% less stress. They had 106% more energy at work, 50% increase in productivity, 13% fewer sick days, a 76% increase in engagement, 40% less burnout. And I think this is the most interesting of that list of statistics. The fact that high trust organizations had a 20% increase in general life satisfaction. In other words, if people are working in a place where they feel trusted and they're given trust, it goes beyond work. General life satisfaction increases. So what does this mean? What do we have to do at work? There's something interesting when you unpick Paul Zach's research a bit further, that a little bit of stress is okay, you know, what they call challenge stress. That's really working together on projects that are achievable, but they involve determination and hard work, because that little bit of stress where you're working with other people to achieve a common purpose is actually produces oxytocin. So it produces trust, if you like. Recognition is another one. Recognizing hard work. And I know from employee satisfaction surveys that recognition in itself is really important for people feeling satisfied at work. More important than promotion, more important than salary or any of those things. Something about giving training and direction, but trusting people to do it once they've been given that training and direction. So not micromanaging, in other words. And another survey before the pandemic in 2014 showed that over half of employees would give up a 20% raise for greater control over their work. So we know that trust matters. Working from home, blended working has had a big impact on trust. We've heard about working hours. We know about employee engagement. And we know that this is the wrong slide from where I'm thinking of, because I'm looking at completely the different one. Trust really matters as well in terms of strategic focus. And it really relies on an adult conversation. We need to be able to not parent people that we're working with. But if you know transaction analysis, you know that the ideal is that we're having an adult conversation and we're being adult. If we have a tendency to micromanage or control, we're stepping into parent mode. And then we might get a childlike response. So we need to stay adult. Talking about coaching for trust then, how might we do it? Some of the other contexts within which we're working involve understanding emotional intelligence. This is what we used to call the soft skills. Emotional intelligence is a really useful framework when we're considering trust, because it looks at our interactions between people. Things like rapport. You know, we talked about rapport right at the beginning, about why I told you that story. It helps increase trust. When we're coaching for trust, we are modeling best practice. We're walking the talk. As coaches, we're talking about cultivating trust and safety. One of our first competencies that we do, we create the space within which people can share, people can be honest, people can make mistakes, people can be vulnerable. I had a conversation with a coaching client the other day, and they were saying to me, well, this is for us, it's not for out there. As if out there was a completely different environment for her to be vulnerable in, and it wouldn't be acceptable for her to share the same things that she was doing in a coaching environment. So I think when we're coaching leaders, we need to make sure that they are creating those environments out there, that they're creating the capacity within their teams to have those vulnerable conversations and to create that level of safety and trust. One of the other things that we do as coaches is we listen. And we listen to understand, not to sort of wait and get our point across and prove the person speaking wrong. We listen to understand a different perspective, because we understand that their perspective is valid, that our clients are resourceful and whole. And when we're coaching managers to create an environment at work which is trust-based, we need to be encouraging the same. Underneath our work as coaches is an ethical code. We are demonstrating ethical practice. And we also reflect on our work. We don't always get it right, but we try and think back on our work and think, okay, what can we do differently next time? Where do we change things? What did I get wrong? And that's about being vulnerable ourselves. It's about walking the talk. There's something about management behaviors. I'm not trusting my own slide deck now, so I'm waiting with bated breath to see what the next slide is when I go to the page. No, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to look at my handout, because I've got all the slides I wanted to show you on there. I'm just going to talk you through them. We need to be supporting expressions of feelings, perceptions, concerns, beliefs. This is one of our competencies as coaches now. And I think it translates into a management competency as well. There's something again about managers asking for help. Managers shouldn't tell. There's a lot of research about this. Managers tell and micromanage. They can create stress. If managers ask for support, they're actually increasing levels of oxytocin, which, as we know, is the trust drug. So asking for support rather than telling to do. And again, things like the coach competency about client growth. We can coach our managers to focus on growth. So instead of those kind of backwards looking performance reviews at the end of the year, turn it around and have a forward-looking growth plan. How can your managers support their teams to get the next promotion? How can they support them to grow? Changing the perspective builds trust. It builds levels of oxytocin. It builds trust. Inviting our client's response to any offering that we make as a coach, and then accepting that response. That's being vulnerable. It's being open to hearing it. And we've also talked about making our intentions clear. That's an important management behavior. And these management behaviors are fundamental to building trust. So as coaches working with managers, what we are doing is we are modeling that. And how we can make our intentions clear is by contracting. And when I'm talking about contracting, I'm talking about agreements. So that's what we want to have happen here. Why is that important? How we know we've succeeded? What needs to be overcome to get there? What else do we need to consider? And what else? And why is that important? And what else do we need to consider? And how are you feeling right now? And how do you want to feel? And what do we need to consider? These questions are all about contracting, and they build trust. Our new ICF competencies talk about the culture and context of our client. I mentioned bias before, the fact that we have a tendency to trust people that are like ourselves. So we need to be very aware of that. We also need to be aware of the culture and systems within which our clients are operating. And I think psychological safety is key to this. Amy Edmondson started the phrase psychological safety to encapsulate the idea of trust-based teams where people can be vulnerable because they're not afraid to make mistakes, that mistakes are a learning opportunity, and actually a culture where we're scared to make mistakes will get in the way of innovation. I realise that I've been talking a lot and I've got another couple of slides to conclude, but I want to open up to comments and suggestions for a little while. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you do as coaches to build trust.
Well, I can start first. So for those of us who are here, you could post your thoughts in the comment section below, or you can unmute yourself. So for me, Mary, the way I build trust, it's to really have like real conversations with clients, just having an open space, holding the space for them, and just sharing with them, also creating that commonality. I think to me, having the commonality is really important. The common language, and sometimes speaking the language of the clients, allowing that space. So sometimes I would try to avoid too professional sounding terms, and make my language really relatable to them. So that's how I begin building trust for them.
Thank you. I've got some other comments about listening, engaging, being fully present. Listen without an agenda. Yes, or agreeing an agenda. So listening without an agenda, as in your own kind of how you're going to steer things, but actually co-creating an agenda is another useful way of creating trust. Being authentic and vulnerable. Be open to whatever happens. Not wedded to landing a client. Feel their heartbeat, sense who they are, listen for their context, their future, their dreams. There's something in that I want to talk to, which is about coaching presence. And the reason that I called my group and my podcast Coaching Presence is because I think that's what it's all about. It's that Avni shared. It's about believing our clients are resourceful and whole. And somehow when we're in a coaching conversation with them, turning down our self a little bit, our stuff, our ego, and tuning up our empathy, and actually just being with them, feeling their heartbeat, as Avni so beautifully put it. It's just listening with rapt attention, listening with your head, your heart, and your gut, with the belief that they have everything that they need, and your job is to just help them find it. Interesting question. Do you think it's exhausting to continue to prove you're trustworthy? I think if we go back to that difference in trust between the affective trust, the one where we're kind of, and the cognitive trust, there's a difference. So we don't need to, in a way, my MCC is in a coaching world is kind of my badge of honor. That's the kind of seal of approval that kind of gives a bit of proof and legitimacy and credibility. Then obviously my day-to-day behavior is the cognitive side of things. So I think that we don't need to continually prove ourselves. There's an interesting thing about when trust is broken as well, how much we're likely to forgive, and what we forgive and what bits. You know, there are certain people that you will have different levels of trust with. So some people you can trust to do certain things, like certain people have the same taste as you. You could trust them to go out and choose a new rug for your living room, for example. Other people, the same person, you may not trust to give you the money back they borrowed. But there are different levels of trust with different people. We don't have to prove all the trust, everything all the time. However, we do need to stick to our word. If we continually break trust, if we don't stick to agreements, then we're going to lose people's faith in us, because it's remembering, it's them believing in our truth. And our truth might be different to their truth. And there's that realization that actually it may be too different for you to want to hold someone as, consider them as trustworthy. Something else within the new competencies about creating trust and safety. Coaches acknowledge and respect the client's unique talents, insights, and work in the process. Acknowledges and respects. Doesn't mean agrees with. I think there's a subtle difference. So it's not just saying that, it's not being the same, it's respecting that you may have different perspectives, but that they will stick to theirs, you will stick to yours, and that creates a situation where one can trust one another because you are open and honest in that dialogue. Another thing about confidentiality, not sharing what the client shares with anyone. I think that is absolutely key to us as coaches, that we have a code of ethics. And actually the first thing that we say to our clients is that this is a confidential conversation. That no matter who is paying for the coaching, the person in front of us is our client. And what they tell us is confidential. How can we be fully present? There's a question here about being fully present. How can we do that? There was something in what I said as well about oxytocin. Remember, I was saying that stress gets in the way of oxytocin. So we need to manage our well-being, look after ourselves. If we're stressed, we're less likely to be trustworthy or trusting. So if we're tired, the sort of holy trinity of resilience, rest, nutrition, exercise, if we're low on that, low on resilience, feeling that we're highly stressed, this is going to be difficult for us. We're not going to be managing our emotion. We're not going to be fully present. Before we open up for more questions, I just wanted to round off with, and I'm now not trusting, I said I'm not trusting the final slide, but I had a slide about, with a nice word play on trust. My background's communications. We couldn't ever help ourselves with doing these about trust, about using different words. So if we think about trust, it's about talking more, not making assumptions. One of my clients shared a story where she was a new girl in this big company, and she had a strong background in, it was a communications background like I have, strong background in communications, and she was tasked with this big project that was going to go external. So she block booked time with the web team, and she made all these arrangements for how this was going to go. This new report was going to go on the website, blah, 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 blah. In the next meeting, there was this absolute kerfuffle about it, because when she had been told it was going externally, she had assumed to an external audience and had taken up a lot of time with the web team and the PR team and everybody else to get this external message out. And external meant partners. It didn't mean external to the broader organization. So when we unpacked it, we were talking about assumptions. And I think when we are working beyond these four walls, the assumptions thing is absolutely adamant. What does that word mean? When you say external, do I know what external means? Because she felt that she was new in and had broken trust with all the people she got to do work for her. And she felt that she had let down the bigger organization just because of the misunderstanding of one word. So talk more. We can't assume things. Responsibility. This is about being trustworthy in order to earn trust. The U, unconditional positive regard. That's what we need to be thinking of with our clients. We need to hold our clients in unconditional positive regard. We break trust by stepping above the coach's role and offering solutions to, offering solutions says that we don't trust our clients to do the work themselves. Sense and intuition go beyond words. Think about the body language as well, and the unsaid word, the unsaid stuff. And then tailor, temper your trust. Know that we have a bias to trust. We have a tendency to overtrust. Remember, someone else's truth is not your truth. If you're trusting somebody else, you need to trust their truth and not expect it to be the same as yours. So temper things. Remember, trustworthiness can be faked. The whole use of body language can be learned to make yourself appear more trustworthy. Con men and con women around the world are very good at doing that, building fake trust. So tailor it. And the last thing is to trust the process. If we're coaches, we need to trust that coaching is the right thing for people. We need to trust our clients to come up with their own solutions. We need to not overstep the mark and try and add value by solving problems. We need to trust that sometimes discomfort is where our clients need to be. We need to trust them to solve it themselves. Trust coaching. Thank you so much. That's all I wanted to talk to you about. I want to leave plenty of time for any more questions or comments.
Okay, now we open the floor for questions. Anyone has questions for Mary? You're free to unmute yourself. You can also turn on your camera so that Mary can see you.
Yes, good evening. Can I ask?
Yes, please, Devan.
Good afternoon. My name is Devang. I am from India. What
Hello.
a wonderful session. What a wonderful session.
Thank you. And I apologize for my muddle up in slides. I will have the right ones.
No, it's okay.
Latest version for you.
The essence, the ethos, and the coverage really touched me. I'm a practicing coach from India, and I'm on my path to PCC. My concern, if not a concern, I don't know whether it's a question in itself, is the whole aspect of generating trust with the client even before the coaching engagement begins. And what you kind of sort of wanted to convey, and you conveyed it very rightly, was on the area of what do you do once the conversation has begun, within and after the conversation. My request to you to enlighten somewhat on what can coaches like us do who are beginning our journey to generate and win trust before even the engagement has happened. For my limited experience, giving free sessions has not worked. giving micro coaching sessions has not worked. Advertising and marketing and branding has its own limitations.
Yeah.
So can you please enlighten? Thank you, Mary.
Okay, so advertising can work for product, but I don't believe it's so good for a service like coaching, because for somebody to want to buy a service, I always say it's like the difference between a haircut and a pair of hairdressing scissors. You know, the scissors themselves can be replicable. They're a product. They can be made the same again and again and again. Whereas the service depends on the hairdresser's skill. It depends on your level of rapport with them. So for people to want to buy a service from you, they need to know, like, and trust you. So that's why advertising in itself, unless you have a reputation already, advertising isn't great for a service. It might work if you make a product out of your service. So buy this package may work, but I think you need to build a reputation first. And that is about, I've got a course called the Coach's Roadmap, which really sets out the duties of being a professional coach. And just, you need to think about how you can get people to know you, like you, and trust you. So, for example, giving talks like this, for example, is one way of getting you now probably trust me a bit more than you did at the beginning. I hope you like me a bit more than you did at the beginning. So your impression of me, your experience of me has changed. You're more likely to buy from me because you probably know me a bit more. You have a deeper sense of trust of me, and I hope you like me. So things like talking, volunteering, just helping people meet you, get to know you in whatever way that is. I really don't believe in giving coaching for free. I think if anything, it can be a skill swap. So that might be that, I don't know, I will give you 3 career coaching sessions. In return, you can mow my lawn and whatever. But I think that there does need to be some sort of swap, because I think that you have probably already invested in your training as a coach and your time, and that needs to be reciprocated in some way. So I don't know if that's helpful, or if you need any more from me.
Thank you.
I could go on for hours, so you have to just shut me up sometimes about that, because
Well, I love what you share, Mary. Anyone else have any questions for Mary? Feel free to unmute yourself, and Mary is here. You can post them in the chat box function as well.
I had a slide, one of my failed last slides to share was if you're on Facebook, go to Coaching Presence and join my group if you're interested. And if you've got any other questions as well, I've got a website, which is my name, mariannawright.com, and you can get in touch with me via that website, or LinkedIn, or join my Facebook group if there's anything else that comes up that people think about.
I think Mona, is it? Mona, you have a question for Mary? I think yeah, I think you're on mute. You can, yeah.
Okay, hi. I want to present myself. I'm Mona. I'm from Tunisia. Actually, I'm living in Greece, and I'm working as a sales account manager. Yeah, so trust is very useful in general in professional and personal life, and especially in sales. It's a key point, I mean, to have. Just when you was presenting, I felt that you were presenting the concept of trust more from the prospect of a company. Yes, we can apply this in a lot of sides to the employees, but as an employee, from the side of employee, I mean, that's why I was asking, do you have as an employee to prove that you are trustworthy all the time, and this is putting much stress on you, because in sales, for example, for my side, I have to prove trustworthy, or it's not to prove, it's to have your job done. You have to be trustworthy with the customer, and you have from the other side also a company.
Yeah.
So you have also to be with your company to show that you are visible, hard worker, respond in timely manner to chat, to emails. So this is, I mean, or we can give the image that you are a trustworthy person, then you can do whatever you want because people, they trust you.
Yeah, I think so. I was hoping to speak from a coach's point of view, working with people. Now, I can understand the impact of a lack of trust on people within organizations. So, for example, one of my clients works for a very well-known company that's, I'm presuming, global. It's certainly well known across Europe. And it's one of those companies that received a massive boost in sales at the beginning of the pandemic when everyone was panic buying. And they were suddenly expected this last year to achieve the same amount of sales as they did at that level of panic buying. There was no reality check that actually probably people had bought and stockpiled as much of this stuff they were ever likely to need, probably for the next 10 years. So that actually, if anything, there'd be a decrease in sales, and they were certainly not going to match the previous sales. And through coaching, we talked about the need to influence upwards. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm thinking that actually part of being adult and not being childlike, remember me talking very briefly about transaction analysis. If we are working with people that are kind of being parental and saying, well, you did it last year, I expect the same this year, you need to step up as an adult and say, I don't think that's realistic, because what I can achieve